Caucus. Congressman Ted Lieu, he is a member of the House Foreign Affairs and Judiciary Committees and is also a former Air Force lawyer. Congressman, good to see you, my friend. So why are there such conflicting characterizations of what happened in those waters? Is what happened truly up for interpretation?
Thank you, Alex, for your question. I served as a JAG for 4 years on active duty and then an additional 21 years in the reserves. And it's very clear that striking shipwreck survivors is a war crime. There's no dispute that the second strike was on shipwreck survivors. And even Senator Cotton says they were trying to flip a boat. There's no evidence they actually flipped that boat. And when you listen to Representative Jim Himes, he says they were in distress. They had no means of locomotion. They had no radio. And then articles say that they appear to have been waving, which could be interpreted as asking for help or surrendering. That's why the Department of Justice needs to open a war crimes investigation.
So the military reportedly said in those closed-door meetings that the second strike was justified because those men were still in the fight. They were going to continue their drug run, or at least try to do that. I know you weren't in the briefing, but as a former Air Force JAG lawyer, is that plausible? I mean, what specifically stands out to you that challenges the military's apparent justification for this second strike?
Well, let's just talk about the strikes of all the boats. So I read the classified legal memo, and on this September 2nd strike, what I can tell you is the reporting is that the boat wasn't even headed towards the United States. It was headed towards another foreign country in South America. So there is no justification whatsoever for the United States military to prevent drugs from going from one foreign country to another foreign country in South America. So I'm not even sure the first strike itself was legal. And certainly the second strike is not legal because, again, it's a war crime to hit shipwreck survivors.
So Donald Trump said this week he would have no problem releasing the footage, and now Democrats on the House Armed Services Committee are asking him to make good on it. The Pentagon has released plenty of videos of the other attacks on these alleged drug boats. But how important, sir, is it for the video of this strike to become public?
It's extremely important, and the American public should be able to see and decide for themselves whether or not this looks like a war crime. And if it does, then we need to have people prosecuted. And certainly, at the very least, we need an investigation opened to see if this was a war crime, and if it was, if there was a cover up of it, and who was involved in executing the illegal orders. I also note that there were other boat strikes where there were shipwreck survivors, and the U.S. military saved those people. So why did the U.S. military act differently in later cases? And it would suggest to me that the military knew what they did in this case on September 2nd was wrong.
Yeah, you bring up something that I keep asking that question. There were two survivors specifically from one, and they were repatriated to their countries. It just doesn't really make sense. But that said, we have lawmakers on both sides who've said Admiral Bradley, who oversaw the strikes, told them he did not receive a kill them all order, despite earlier reporting saying otherwise. So does that now exonerate Secretary Hegseth? And if so, who is responsible?
Well, let's be clear. Secretary Hegseth lied when the media reports came out about the second strike. So covering up a war crime could also be a federal crime. But we need to see what the rules of engagement are. We need to see what was the general atmosphere in which Secretary Hegseth gave this authorization. And did the military commanders understand that their role was to basically have no quarter and to make sure there are no survivors? So we don't know any of that in terms of what the actual written authorizations and orders are. That's why there needs to be an investigation, and this information needs to be released.
So I want to get to the root of all this, because at least 87 people have been killed in 22 known attacks since the alleged drug boat strikes began. That's according to the administration. But is this debate over the double strike missing the point here? Does accusing the administration of a war crime make it seem the U.S. is legitimately at war with these alleged drug smugglers, or narco-terrorists, as the administration calls them? Is it an official war?
That's a very interesting question. So let's just first acknowledge that grocery prices are continuing to increase. Electricity costs are now starting to surge, and healthcare costs are skyrocketing. And what is the Trump administration focused on? these boat strikes.
A little more of Hegseth speaking moments ago, and a question from Lucas Tomlinson from Fox News was asked as well. I want to play it, and then I'd love to get your reaction to it. Let's listen.
Can you take us back to the September 2nd strike off the coast of Venezuela, the very first one when combat operations began in the Caribbean, and walk us through the timeline and your role in it, from mission planning, the operation, and the follow-on strikes?
Absolutely. So it took us a couple of weeks, almost a month, to develop, and I can't get into sources and methods and all of those things for obvious reasons, but you have to develop the intel picture, get an understanding of what you're looking at. And a lot of our assets, as I talked about in the speech, have been pointing 10,000 miles around at the other side of the world for a very long time. So once we got to the point where a strike was imminent, I had taken the decision responsibility up to my level. Not many military decisions should be made by the Secretary of War. I believe in deferring those decisions to local commanders as much as possible. But because of the strategic implications of the first few strikes, I wanted to hold that decision at my level. And the briefing that I received before that strike was extensive, exhaustive, I would say, as each one is since. On the military side, on the civilian side, lawyers, intel analysts, red teaming, every aspect. What do we know? What do we know about their affiliation? A lot of things I can't share in this room to give us the kind of confidence that we know where this is coming from, who's driving it, who's on it, what their intentions are, where it's all the details you need to strike a designated terrorist organization, which is an important thing to remember at the top of all this. The president has designated these as terror organizations, poisoning and threatening the American people, making them a target just like Al-Qaeda. So in that room, in that moment, I can't remember exactly how long it would have been, 20, 30 minutes of a preview of exactly what's going on. And my job was to say, execute or don't execute. So I was satisfied with the strike criteria, yes. Saw the strike itself, which all of you have seen. There was probably 30 or 40 minutes, is what I've been told, of dust, and it was on fire for a long time after that. I stayed for probably five minutes or so after, but ultimately at that point it was a tactical operation, and so I moved on to other things. I shouldn't be fighting tactics as the Secretary of War, so I moved on to other things. Later on, a couple hours later, I was told, hey, there had to be a reattack because there were a couple folks that could still be in the fight, access to radios, there was a link-up point of another potential boat, drugs were still there, they were actively interacting with them, had to take that reattack. I said, Roger, sounds good. From what I understood then and what I understand now, I fully support that strike. I would have made the same call myself. Those that were involved in 20 years of conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan or elsewhere know that reattacks and restrikes of combatants on the battlefield happen often. In this particular case, it was well within the authorities of Admiral Bradley, who's an incredible American, an American hero. And the 22 or 23 strikes since have followed a similar protocol of ensuring we meet the criteria. The decision's not at my level anymore. And then we take the strike.
After Admiral Bradley.
All right. So what are your thoughts on hearing that as he, tries to explain the timeline and then once again makes a distinction that the vessel was burning for about 20 to 30 minutes. He watched for about 5, but then left. At the same time, he says, if he were asked, he would endorse this course of action. What do you read into or decipher from all that we just heard?
Well, he's working very, very hard and frankly, I think incorrectly to justify the entire organization, what they're trying to do here, taking these boats out with these strikes. The second strike, he didn't really explain that in any detail. And here's why we need to have a detailed public hearing. We need to get to the bottom of this. This is really the opening pages of a major scandal. It clearly involves the Secretary of Defense and others. And so what we need to do is to be very careful, get all of the facts, get all of the communications, get all of the video, put the timelines together, and actually understand exactly what Hegseth said. He still has not dealt with this issue of killed all of them.
Getting more and more info that Pete and Trump are falling apart, and they're getting warned by experts. Experts that are on their side, experts that are on the other side, and just people who are nonpartisan, which is most of the public service, right? And what these people are telling them across the board is, you've done something wrong probably, you need to change course, and my goodness, it could get ugly for you. And you've seen a change in tone. Remember, they were bragging about doing these strikes. Trump was, many congressional Republicans were, Hegseth was making memes about it, like making fake children's cartoon books, being like that we're doing this, and he went on Fox News and bragged about it, and basically said, oh, I'm the big dog, I was in there, I saw it happen. And then once it started changing, right? Once the narrative changed and that this was, objectionable and the boat was going the other way and all of that, then they started to find a guy to blame. They tried to blame this random admiral. And I know he's not a low-level guy. He's also a high-ranking military guy. But it does seem like they weren't giving this guy credit when it was deemed something that showed Trump to be a strong law and order, pro-military guy. But now that it's politically disadvantageous, well, lo and behold, they're trying to pawn it off on this guy. When ultimately, it's still the shot is called by the president and by the Secretary of Defense. That's full stop. They're the ones in charge. And if they're not, then that's an issue too, because why are you not in charge of your own departments? Trump and Hegseth, though, what they're now getting is it's too late. Genie can't be put back in the bottle. Now they're trying to deny this or try to pawn it off on somebody else. It's too late. They've already too many times taken credit for actions like this and acted big and tough when they thought it was politically and legally viable to act big and tough. And it's only now that they're facing trouble that they're changing their tune and throwing other people under the bus. But it's not going to work.